Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Boris Johnson waded into the election campaign for the first time today and immediately ran into some political flack. He told the BBC that if asked, Britain would take part in further American action in Syria, even without a vote in the House of Commons. Labour have also criticised what they say is a highly personalised attack on Jeremy Corbyn. Our political editor Laura Koonsberg has been speaking to both men.
Anybody got a cup of coffee?
Coffee fuels campaigns, so do big personalities. And they do start early.
Americano would be fantastic. And no sugar.
Boris Johnson burst out this morning.
It seems incredible when you have a threat.
With both barrels, claiming Jeremy Corbyn is weak on defence and can't be trusted.
He is with me now. Good morning.
Good morning, John.
And suggesting the UK could join in if America again bombed Syria.
If they come to us and ask for our support, whether it's with submarine-based cruise missiles in the Med or whatever it happens to be, as was the case back in 2013, John, it would be, in my view, and I know this is also the view of the Prime Minister, it'd be very difficult for us to say no.
But you'd have to go to the Commons.
I think that needs to be tested. But I think it'd be
you're not sure about that?
I think it would be very difficult for us to say no.
He's said similar before, but it matters now. Because the Tories believe Jeremy Corbyn is soft on defence, whether regarding Syria or the rest of the world.
I think there is a risk that people will kind of say, well, he's just an Islingtonian herbivore, a mutton-headed mugwump or whatever.
Only the Labour Party's putting forward any ideas so far. It seems all the Tory party is going to do is be rude about Jeremy Corbyn.
The world is more unstable, more uncertain than perhaps we thought it was going to be 20 years ago. And that is why Theresa May's leadership now is so important. And that's why it's so important for me, I'm afraid, to draw the contrast between her approach and what I think would be the chaotic approach under Jeremy Corbyn.
Jeremy Corbyn's in their sights. You could call him the underdog. In a park today in the marginal seat of Harlow. But Labour MPs fear their leader has to be reminded not just to talk to his true believers, but to the whole country. The Tories think that makes him a real outsider.
We take a message out to the whole country.
Politics is, of course, always personal, but so far this campaign has been much more about Tory attacks on Jeremy Corbyn than a big battle of ideas. What do you think of what the Tories have been doing so far? I mean, it's already getting very personal, isn't it?
Well, that's their nature, isn't it? David Cameron was a bully, and now they're proven to be bullies as well.
In a way that's
it does seem like a witch hunt. It does.
A witch hunt?
It does seem like a bit of a hunt, really.
Why don't Boris Johnson talk about the Tory policies for the general election and not have a go at the Labour leader?
His wife seems to want to avoid the attention. This is an awkward moment for Labour.
But are you worried that this is already turning into a sort of personality contest? It's clearly what the Tories are trying to do is make it very much about you.
I don't do personal abuse, I don't do name calling, I don't believe in that kind of politics because I think we're sent to Parliament to represent people, we're sent to Parliament to put forward a serious debate, and that's what we'll be doing.
If you were Prime Minister and the President of America asked the UK to support them in another strike on Syria, what would you do?
Call the General Secretary of the United Nations. We need a multilateral approach to Syria. We need an enhanced pressure to get a political settlement in Syria.
Morning all. All right, how are you?
Raising potential military action against Syria is controversial in any campaign. The other parties weren't impressed either.
So a unilateral, illegal intervention would be utterly counterproductive. It seems to me that Boris Johnson is following Tony Blair in that respect.
And if the government wants to have parliamentary authority, then they should ask for parliamentary authority, not speculate wildly and we'll jump to whatever President Trump does.
The Prime Minister wouldn't go quite as far as her Foreign Secretary on a more staid visit in Derbyshire. But she and he believe Jeremy Corbyn is vulnerable, and they plan to make it hurt. Laura Koonsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
On the general election trail, Theresa May is in Leeds tonight to reiterate her message of stable leadership. Tonight, she's talking to Conservative supporters at an event in Hare Hills, a traditionally Labour voting working-class area. A Labour challenger was once again focusing on policy issues. Today it was the country's housing shortage, though Mr Corbyn also faced a personal attack from the Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is in Westminster. So, Gary, this is becoming quite a familiar message from Theresa May now, isn't it?
It certainly is, although a slight departure tonight from the script in that stump speech she's just been giving. A slight one, and probably not going to be a regular occasion, departures from the core script, because she's responded to something that Chancellor Merkel has been saying in Berlin. The German Chancellor, speaking to the Bundestag, said that she thought quite a lot of people in Britain were under an illusion about just how easy it was going to be, Brexit, and that they might be able to keep some of the good bits and do away with the bad bits, the costs of Brexit. She also emphasised that she wanted Britain to pay the bill for Brexit and not necessarily be able to move straight into discussions about a future relationship until that had been settled as an issue. Now, it's being said by people around Theresa May, the only reason she's talking about it tonight, she said that this shows how tough the negotiations are going to get, is because she wants to emphasise how the country needs her, Theresa May's, supreme talents to get through all of this difficult negotiation. But a few people at the top of government I've spoken to are actually slightly relieved to hear any reference to tough negotiations, because they think these first 10 days of the campaign have slightly lost that, and there's a risk that further down the line after the election, if Theresa May is elected, people will be wondering why it is so tough and so difficult, and maybe why some of the rewards aren't so great. But as I say, this is a rare departure from the central script, and on the whole, both the two main political leaders are sticking pretty rigidly to their core messages.
Hello, how are you?
Jeremy Corbyn, campaigning in Essex, was pledging that the Labour government would see 1 million new homes built. Half of them council and housing association homes.
What road's that then?
While the Tories were getting personal, the Foreign Secretary attacking Jeremy Corbyn as a mutton-headed mugwump who couldn't be trusted on foreign policy, Jeremy Corbyn, no, that's your supporters, the cameras are this way, was getting his message across.
And yesterday at Prime Minister's Question Time, I was thinking, how does one encapsulate in a couple of words what this Tory government is about? And I said this: they're a government that is very strong against the weakest, and very weak against the strongest, the wealthiest and the richest. That is the difference between them and us.
Compare that to the rigid message discipline of the Prime Minister today visiting a factory in Derby.
I say that actually every vote for me and a local Conservative candidate will be a vote to strengthen my hand in the important Brexit negotiations we have coming up, and will be a vote for strong and stable leadership to take us through Brexit but also beyond. It'll be a vote for me and a local Conservative candidate is a vote for strong and stable leadership in the national interest.
You hear it on Tory viral ads as well. Echoes of the last carefully road-tested, relentlessly repeated Tory slogan from the last general election.
The Conservative long-term economic plan is working.
Our long-term economic plan...
The political anoraks who are following this, their ears will be bleeding listening to this stuff. But the voters, you say...
I think if you're a political strategist and you're in this position, suck it up. It's your time to face some of this, I think, is probably the attitude. It's get used to it. We want to establish in people's mind that we have the best leader.
In the last election, testing as I was in focus groups with swing voters around the country, people said to me, I am fed up to the back teeth of long-term economic plan. But actually, in the end, when we asked them after the election, well, how did you vote? They voted Tory, of course. Why? Because the Tories had that long-term economic plan. Yes, it worked.
10 days into this election, there are signs the message hasn't got through to everyone yet.
Which one do you think Theresa May says? You think she says that one? Which one do you think is his slogan?
Put it here.
You think that's Jeremy Corbyn's slogan?
Yeah.
What word do you associate with Theresa May?
I think she's quite a strong leader. I don't really take much notice of politics.
But you don't remember hearing her say that slogan?
No.
You worried they might be brainwashing you secretly?
You never know. You never know.
Steady. She is steady. She's good. Stable probably. There's nothing wrong with Theresa May.
She's so calm.
Calm?
And cute.
And cute?
Yes. I like her.
Calm and cute?
Yeah.
Maybe they should have made that the slogan.
My government has pursued a programme that has delivered stability, security and strong leadership.
They even put the words into the Queen's proclamation proroguing Parliament. The snap election has thrown plans for the next state opening of Parliament. The government wants it as early as possible after the election. The Queen wants to get to Ascot races. So for the first time since the 1974 snap election, it'll be a dressed-down occasion. No carriages, hats, not crowns.
Yep. Well, Theresa May is still at that event in Leeds tonight, and one phrase is coming up over and over again. Here's a flavour of it.
Every vote cast for me and local Conservative candidates will be a vote for strong and stable leadership in taking Britain not just through Brexit but beyond. It will be a vote for strong and stable leadership in the national interest. And that is what this election is about.
Simeon Brown has been listening to the Prime Minister speak. So, Simeon, tell us a little bit more about what she's been saying.
Now, we're in Leeds East. Now, this is not supposed to be a marginal seat. It has a Labour majority of 12,000, and that vote actually increased in 2015. Now, if Conservatives are going to target these kinds of seats, not only are they trying to win this election, they're trying to wipe out Labour. And it says a lot about their confidence if they believe that they can win here, especially with such a narrow message. As Gary said, the large part of their message has been around Brexit and appealing to the national interest, as Theresa May spoke about earlier. But there are also local and regional issues, bread and butter issues that matter to communities like this. And one of them is the housing crisis, which is uniting communities up and down the country. It's in talking about these issues around housing where Labour hope to capitalise. The Labour-run city of Leeds is doing something Jeremy Corbyn wants to emulate and Theresa May is yet to talk about: building more council homes. Today, Labour made an eye-catching election promise to build 1 million new houses. That includes 500,000 social homes. Gary is one man who knows better than most. 2 years ago, he was homeless, but now he's working with the charity Latch to renovate empty houses into homes for people with nowhere to live, whilst waiting for that elusive council home.
I'm bidding every week for council houses, but there's nothing coming up. There's nothing coming up. They're just not available. And the other route's private rented accommodation, but a lot of that's it's not the best. A lot of dodgy landlords, and it's an expense. It's a lot of money to go into a private rented accommodation. It's just I've come so far, and it feels like because of the lack of housing, I've had to stop. And that's holding up other people from getting the same support and the same opportunities I've had. And it's kind of distressing.
And as a single man, do you ever expect to be housed in a council property?
To be honest, no, I don't feel like I'm much of a priority, and I can understand when there's other people out there that are maybe a bit more vulnerable than me.
But the expense of private rents and the rise in house prices mean it's not just the most vulnerable who are calling for more social housing. Labour's promise on council homes is a policy designed to have national appeal. At last count, 1.2 million people were waiting on council lists, and most will struggle to ever be housed. The Lib Dems point out that Labour's pledge of 500,000 new social homes is about the same amount they sold off when last in government. And many ask, is 1 million new homes a promise they can afford?
You can say there's a huge cost in delivering that, but there's also a huge cost in not delivering that. If you look at the number of people who are in work and claiming housing benefit because rents are so high, if those people were living in social housing with affordable rents, your housing benefit bill would drop dramatically. And once you've invested money in those 1 million new homes, that carries on giving and giving and giving.
This street makes up part of the 1,000 new council homes Leeds City Council is developing. Mohammed moved in last year. His family were a priority case because his parents are disabled. He says the private rental market could not meet his family's needs at a price they could afford.
It wouldn't help me a rented house, and it wouldn't offer me the same variety of choices as council estates and houses do. So I'm really happy that actually council gave us this house.
Do you feel like housing will be a big issue this election?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The more they do, the better it is for people out there like ourselves. We got this, there might be God knows how many other people out there that are struggling the same way that we were.
But the Conservatives say they have a plan for more affordable homes and only they can deliver it.
Last election, housing was a contested battleground, but with the Conservatives keen to talk Brexit and leadership, Labour hope their messages on the issues like housing will have more room to cut through.
So, which is having more traction with voters? Labour's policy issues like housing or the Conservatives' promise of stable leadership with Theresa May? Well, joining me now in the studio, Aisha Hazarinka, a former special advisor to Ed Miliband, and James Frayne, a former Conservative government communications strategist and CEO of the PR firm Public First. Now, both of you, look at this poster from tonight's event. Theresa May, strong, stable leadership in the national interest. You can't even see the word Conservative on that poster. Aisha, I mean, there are two things going on here, it strikes me on. The first is the slogan. The second is making this election all about Theresa May v Jeremy Corbyn.
Absolutely, I totally agree with that. I mean, they're doing a very classic Conservative playbook thing. Certainly the message, strong, stable leadership, is very reminiscent of the long-term plan for long-term economic growth that they really pounded last time. And definitely the Conservatives are trying to take advantage of the fact that there is, there's a lot of clear water in terms of the leadership ratings, and she's very much trying to make this a sort of presidential-style contest.
So do you think this will work?
Well, time will tell, but I think certainly from the last election, it was quite effective just to keep hammering a very, very, very simple message. And I think as well the campaign will probably turn quite nasty against Jeremy Corbyn, as it did with Ed Miliband in 2015. And sometimes a kind of strong fear message can be quite effective.
I mean, I presume you think this is going to work. This must be a Linton Crosby strategy where they think Theresa May is so far ahead, personally, that that's what you bang on about.
I think it depends what you mean by is it going to work. I mean, the Conservatives are going to win this election. It's all about how much. The Conservatives are not really running against Jeremy Corbyn. They're running a campaign to raise turnout. They're going to win.
Against apathy.
Yeah, exactly. The question is how much are they going to win by? So I think whilst it makes sense for them to start by talking about stable leadership, they've done all their polling, they're competent guys, I think in time they're going to have to come up with some pretty concrete retail policies to actually get people out of their armchairs into the polling booths. So I think by framing it around we're the guys that are going to implement Brexit, give us a free hand in those negotiations, makes total sense. Makes sense as well, I think, to look at capping energy policy. It's not my cup of tea, but it makes sense electorally speaking. I think where I am a little bit worried from a turnout perspective is by implying that people's taxes are going to go up. So they've talked about getting rid of the pledge not to raise taxes. That, to me, in a turnout election doesn't strike me.
Let's come to the specifics in the moment. I mean, I'm just wondering about, in terms of this working and getting the Conservatives ahead in these early stages of the campaign, which the opinion polls certainly suggest they are. I mean, does Labour need to acknowledge that personality and the individuals matter, or does it have to keep trying to take the high ground?
I think it's hard for the Labour Party at the moment because a lot of MPs, as we know, are not super fans of Corbyn. And I think quite a lot of MPs have made a decision that they will sort of fight their seat on local issues and Labour values. Because
they can't bear to say make Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister.
But also, I think it doesn't really pass the smell test with a lot of their constituents when they possibly voted against him in a vote of no confidence motion. But the one thing that I think the Conservatives have to be cautious of, it's a hubris before nemesis, in terms of, yes, they've got a really big poll lead at the moment. We know that polls don't always get it right. I know that to my own personal cost from the last general election. And I think you're absolutely right about the apathy message. Trying to stimulate that vote to come out is going to be very important. And with the greatest respect, Theresa May is not the most exciting politician. She's not a great performer, which is one of the reasons they're not doing the TV debates.
But we're in the absurd situation of the Conservatives having to talk up the chances of Jeremy Corbyn.
I just don't think that's credible. And I take the point that, Theresa May is... she's I think a very good Prime Minister. She's not a born campaigner. She doesn't love doing it like someone like Boris does. That's why I think they're going to have to move to some quite concrete policies. So,
but they won't go near the NHS, for example, will they? Because that's the one issue Labour's always ahead of.
No, clearly not. But there are places like as I say, I think I wouldn't have done what they've done on tax, but there are other things they could do. They can start bringing crime into this election. There's a whole bunch of things that are going to get.
But what would the idea? I mean, would the idea be to scare people about a Labour government, which is what happened in 2015, or how do you motivate people if it's not?
This is the big question. I think this is why I think they're going to have to get down to brass tacks and start saying we're going to vote for us, and we've got these 5 big, we're going to promise you 5. Yeah, well. Don't say bribe, but yes, bribe. But I think the thing about Brexit is probably where they're going to keep coming back to, which is we need to walk into those negotiations in Brussels and off to meet Angela Merkel and everybody else. We need basically a landslide to go in and to get a deal on behalf of the British people.
Is that credible?
A strong message.
See, what I think is interesting about the Theresa May thing, she's actually done pretty well. Her ratings are high by having quite a low-key media approach. She doesn't do a lot of stuff with the press. She doesn't do a lot of stuff with the public as well. Now, the next 6 weeks, the spotlight is going to be on her. Now, she may do better than we all think, but so far she's already made some interesting sort of mistakes on the tax. They've sent out a signal that they might not kind of secure the pensioner lock, all that type of thing. And she doesn't get the pulse racing in terms of a really high-energy, motivates. Like, I would be interested to see, for example, how does she motivate young people to go out and vote? How does she get the BAME communities, all those sort of things? And definitely remember, yes, she's making a strong Brexit argument, but 48% of the country are pretty strongly against her, sort of the Brexit she wants. So definitely, look, you can't deny she's in an advantageous position right now.
Presumably she doesn't care about getting the young vote out and the BAME vote out, because she doesn't need them. What she needs is the old white vote and the UKIP vote and all of that.
Probably. I mean, if she needs to do a slam dunk with the provincial lower middle class, who make up around half the electorate. And if you can nail those guys down, you know, you've got a landslide. But again, I agree that she's not a born campaigner. Again, I think a competent prime minister. But I think they're going to have to send for Boris at some point. And
well, they did today.
Do you think if you didn't have Jeremy Corbyn, if you had a different leader, it would be a different popularity rating, but Theresa May wouldn't look as good alongside Tony Blair or Gordon Brown or, you know, any of your previous leaders?
Absolutely. I mean, I think she's quite lucky in the sense that she's got quite a weak opponent. It would be interesting to see...
Because she's not, conventionally charismatic.
No, she isn't, and she's not a brilliant performer. Like, David Cameron was very, very good in Stump, very, very good performer at the leaders' debates and all those types of things. And she doesn't have that quality about her. The message they're trying to sell is she's a sober woman, you know, she can take kind of serious decisions. But when you're out campaigning...
What can Corbyn do?
Well, I think Corbyn has to just throw absolutely everything at it. I think he's got to go out with a very strong personal message about here's the things he really, really believes in. I think he's got to make an emotional appeal to the country about values. I think she's making quite a calculated... She's making a head argument. He's got to make a heart argument.
Do you think he can do any damage? I mean, what would you fear if you were running the Tory operation?
At the moment, I wouldn't really be talking much about what Jeremy Corbyn's going to do. I'd be talking all about how we turn our voters out. That said, if I was Jeremy Corbyn, I would run the most negative campaign that British politics has ever seen to drive down her numbers. That's all he can do.
I mean, I think another message that the Labour Party and others will be getting out is, look, you cannot have, you know, a one-party state. That's not good for democracy. You've got to make sure that her majority is as small as possible.
She's campaigning for strong and stable leadership.
But nobody wants a dictatorship.
And people seem to like it.
Well, we don't know.
Nobody believes a dictatorship is possible in Britain, do they? I mean,
well,
nobody's really scared of that.
Well, I think people think that from a democratic point of view, it doesn't make for good government for her to have an absolutely huge, stonking majority, particularly when you've got Brexit on the horizon.
Aisha Hazarenka and James Frayne, thank you both very much.
Well, we said last night he had been unleashed, and the fallout from Boris Johnson's first big intervention in the election campaign is still being felt tonight. The Foreign Secretary's suggestion that he would consider supporting US airstrikes against Syria without parliamentary approval has been clarified, shall we say, this evening by the Prime Minister. Mrs May described any such request from America as hypothetical because there were no plans for airstrikes.
Theresa May came to Leeds to fight an election, but she arrived tonight facing questions about which other battles she's willing to go into, thanks, in part, to her Foreign Secretary.
Boris is doing a great job as Foreign Secretary.
But not, it seems, when it comes to second-guessing his Prime Minister, as 3 times she seemed at odds with his position on Syria.
Prime Minister, you say he's doing a brilliant job, but I want to press you again here. Do you agree with your Foreign Secretary when he says it would be very difficult to turn down a request from the Americans to strike the Syrian regime? And would you ask Parliament's permission before taking that action?
This is a hypothetical situation because there are no proposals on the table for a further strike against Syria. What Boris has been doing, and has been doing very well, is working diplomatically with the international community. That means a political transition away from President Assad.
America didn't ask for Britain's help when it struck a Syrian airbase this month following an alleged chemical attack by the regime. But today the Foreign Secretary had suggested we could be willing in future.
If the United States were to come to us with a request that we thought was reasonable and proportionate and measured for assistance, then obviously we would have to consider that request. And given our very, very close, well, we'd have to consider it in one way or the other. Given our very, very close strategic relationship with the US, I think we would find it very difficult, Andy, to say no.
If the Labour leader wasn't quite sure where to stand today, well, his position on airstrikes was clear.
You've got to bring the big players together. Unilateral action and bombing isn't necessarily going to bring that about. The actions that need to be taken are those that bring the war to an end.
Mr. Speaker, the Lords who are authorised...
As for the permission of MPs, they won't be here much longer. Parliament wound down today. But most parties wouldn't say yes to airstrikes after saying no 4 years ago.
I'm somebody who felt that the strike against Assad after the chemical weapons usage, that disgraceful use of chemical weapons uses a few weeks ago, I could see that that was proportionate and justified under law. What I will not do is sanction the way it was done.
And if Theresa May really is standing up for Britain, she might need to tell her Foreign Secretary exactly what that involves.
And Paul joins us from Leeds now. Well, Paul, if the Foreign Secretary was having a bit of trouble from the Prime Minister today, he's got trouble closer to home tonight, hasn't he, with his sister Rachel announcing she's actually going to support the Liberal Democrats?
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. This election even dividing families down a Brexit line, it would seem. As you say, the author and journalist Rachel Johnson has decided to join the Lib Dems, spurning not just her brother Boris Johnson, but her other brother, Joe Johnson, too, who's also a Conservative MP. Even worse for the big Brexiteer Boris Johnson. We understand part of this decision is because she is a big Remainer. She says she wept on the day of the Brexit referendum result. Tim Farron has said, look, don't just weep into your coffee, Remainers, come and join the Lib Dems, and that is what she has decided to do. She may even stand for election, which could make it 3 Johnsons in the Commons, though not all on the same benches.
It's kind of bizarre, isn't it? But completely fascinating. Well, let's just move on to UKIP for a moment. Paul Nuttall says he's going to stand as an MP, finally try to become an MP. Where do we think?
Good question, Tom. One bet is Hartlepool, where UKIP came second in the 2015 general election, about 3,000 votes behind Labour. They haven't confirmed yet where Paul Nuttall is going to stand. I mean, to be honest, it shouldn't really be a story that the leader of the party is standing to become an MP anyway, but such is the state of flux that UKIP is in at the moment that it is. We may get a bit more of an inkling from Paul Nuttall tomorrow when he officially launches UKIP's general election campaign. I think part of his agonising here is, of course, he doesn't want a repeat of the Stoke Central by-election, which he lost in February. Part of it is because he's been dealing with all these defections and resignations from UKIP, such as Douglas Carswell in Clacton. We'll have to wait and see whether he can now fill that sort of vacant spot in Parliament, which Douglas Carswell left. I think it may well be a tall order, no matter where he chooses to stand.
OK, Paul, thank you very much indeed. As for other election issues, well, we've been looking this week at what matters to different groups of voters. Tonight, we've focused on the concerns of small businesses in the constituency, which, at the last election, had one of the smallest majorities of anywhere in the UK.
The cotton mills of the Industrial Revolution were what made North Derby famous. These days, businesses here are far smaller, far more diverse. Those that run them reflect the mood of a constituency that's one of the closest in the country. The support of people like Pete Nash could swing it this time, one of 3 railway engineers who set up a micro-brewery. In a tough market where the weak pound pushes up the price of imported yeast, he wants tax shifted from the producer to the consumer.
Freezing corporation tax as it is, but increasing VAT, mainly has been done on the continent with a lot of sugary drinks, increase the VAT on that so that then everybody pays. It's a lot fairer system rather than just penalising small businesses all the time.
Graphic designer Ollie Stanley worries how Brexit will affect his generation. The European Union helps fund the building he works in, and continental clients are already starting to look elsewhere, with real implications much closer to home. So jobs might be lost?
Yeah, absolutely. Jobs might be lost. We won't win might not win as much work, which then obviously has a direct implication on how we run and how we do as a business and how we cope.
Louise West is a band of one, a self-employed lace maker. She is urging policymakers to widen who they help, despite budget cuts.
Well, so many crafts are being lost by lack of involvement with young people, and getting young people interested in something that's not digital is a real concern.
Alex Moss manages a butcher's, but apprentices are difficult to find. He is adamant that a government pledge to create, within 3 years, 3 million apprenticeships across industry generally must be kept.
It's the time to put into the apprenticeship, and hopefully the government carries on the schemes which they are doing, which need doing, because there is a definite need for more upcoming butchers.
Just 41 votes separated victory and defeat here 2 years ago, the smallest of margins that those at small companies could yet swing. Richard Pallow, News at 10, Derby North.